3 days before Christmas, I got a call from my mom while I was standing in the kitchen making coffee. It was the kind of call that sends a chill down your spine from the very first second, a long silence on the other end, like the caller is struggling to swallow a decision too heavy to speak aloud. I spoke first, my voice barely a whisper. "Mom?" There was a sigh. Then my mother spoke, her voice trembling but trying to stay calm. "Angela, I think you shouldn't come home for Christmas this year." I nearly dropped the coffee cup in my hand. "What are you talking about?" "I know it's hard to hear, but your stepfather Frank and his parents are coming. They don't want to see you." I stood frozen. The tiny kitchen suddenly felt colder than ever. Frank, my mom's second husband, had been part of our lives since I was 11. His parents, the grandparents of his son, had never liked me. But this was the first time my mother openly chose them over me. "We always spend Christmas together," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Every year since Dad passed. It's our tradition." Mom didn't respond right away. The silence stretched, twisting something inside me. Finally, she spoke, hesitant. "Angela, they said if we stay in touch with you, they'll cut Frank out of the will. They'll cut ties with all of us. Do you understand?" I felt my heartbeat pounding, each thump echoing in my chest like a warning bell. "So this is about money," I blurted out, my voice rising. "It's not just money," Mom said quickly. "They think you've been out of our lives for a long time. I told them we're not in contact anymore." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You want me to pretend I don't exist?" "Just this once," my mom pleaded. "Angela, they're stubborn and they hold grudges. We have to make them believe no one in the family is connected to you anymore. Please try to understand." I cut her off. "No. You want me to erase myself from the family to secure a promise in some will? Is that the price you've put on me?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I could hear it in her shaky breath. She knew she'd gone too far, but she wasn't turning back. I couldn't continue the conversation. I hung up. I collapsed onto the sofa, still clutching the phone. My chest ached like someone had sliced open an old scar that hadn't fully healed. For years, I thought I had accepted it all. My mom's remarriage, Frank always treating me like an outsider, and never truly being part of their new family. But I never thought Mom would go this far. Would choose the people who ignored me, belittled me to my face, just to protect a clause in a will that didn't even exist yet. I thought back to all those winters, me and Mom walking down streets lit with Christmas lights, sipping hot chocolate and talking about our little family of just the two of us. Back then, after Dad died in a car crash, she'd hold me close and promise, "No one will ever replace your dad in my heart, and you are the most precious thing I have." And now, I was the one being pushed out. I stared at the phone, my mind spinning between past and present. Then I opened my contacts and called the only person I knew would understand. Natalie, my half-sister. No one knew the twisted dynamics of this family better than she did. The phone rang for barely 3 seconds before someone picked up. Natalie's cheerful voice came through. "Angela? What's going on? You're calling so early." I swallowed hard. "Mom just called," I said, my voice catching. "She told me not to come home this year, because Frank's parents will be there." A heavy silence. Then Natalie snapped, "What the heck? Is she serious?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Dead serious. And she told me to pretend I never existed." Natalie's voice sharpened. "If you're not welcome, then I'm not going either. They can't treat you like that and expect everything to be okay." I bit my lip as hot tears began to spill down my cheeks. Natalie, the only person in the family who never turned her back on me, was still standing by me, like she always had. That was when I realized Christmas this year wouldn't be like every other. But at least, I wouldn't be alone. I lost my dad when I was 5, a crash on the highway while he was on his way to pick me up from preschool. Mom never talked much about that day, only quietly tucked his old leather wallet into a drawer and kept it there for years. From that day on, it was just the two of us. Winters in Seattle got colder, but Mom always tried to make me feel warm. We lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor, where sea winds sometimes howled through the old window panes. Even without much money, Mom always baked gingerbread cookies for the holidays and turned the living room into a wonderland of twinkling lights and paper reindeer. I grew up in a love that wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Everything changed when I was 11, when Mom met Frank at a local book fair. He was a quiet man working in tech, a widower with a daughter my age named Amanda. At first, I thought it was great to have a sister, even if not by blood, someone to study and play with. Amanda lived with Frank in a spacious house in Bellevue, and when Mom moved in with them, I thought I was stepping into a new life. But it didn't take long to realize things weren't what I'd hoped. Amanda had a bedroom twice the size of mine. She had a full set of gaming consoles, the latest iPad, and her own Pomeranian, while I got a converted storage room next to the laundry. Frank kept his distance, always polite but cold. But what hurt most was how Amanda's grandparents, Frank's parents, treated me. They visited almost every weekend, showering Amanda with hugs and gifts, while I got a nod from across the room. Once I overheard them telling Mom, "Angela seems like the kind of kid raised without proper discipline. Girls without fathers usually are." They said it like I wasn't standing right behind the door. I'd told Mom everything. She just stayed silent, her eyes briefly sad. "They're old, honey. A little strict," she said, then turned back to chopping vegetables, avoiding my gaze. Amanda and I had some good times together. We did homework, played games, even made a secret club under the dining table. But as we grew older, Amanda started treating me like an outsider. She'd mock the way I talked, call my clothes outdated, and share my private stuff with kids at school. When I fought back, Mom told me to be patient. "You're the one who came later." Then came the summer I was 14. Mom and Frank went on a 2-week trip to Napa Valley, leaving me and Amanda with her grandparents. Usually, I'd stay with Aunt Lena, Mom's sister, but she was away on business. Amanda's grandparents reluctantly agreed to watch us, on the condition that I didn't cause trouble. Everything unraveled after just 4 days. It rained nonstop, so we were stuck indoors. Amanda hogged the computer all day for games, and I just wanted 1 hour to work on my essay. We argued, pushed each other. I didn't mean to, I swear I didn't. But Amanda slipped on the carpet, hit the coffee table, and screamed in pain. She clutched her arm, crying like her whole world had shattered. Her grandparents rushed in, their faces pale when they saw her swollen arm. Without asking, her grandmother grabbed the phone and shouted into it, "That girl attacked my granddaughter! She needs a mental evaluation immediately!" I stood there, heart pounding, trying to explain it was an accident. But no one listened. When the ambulance came, I was locked in the bedroom, the door bolted from the outside. Dinner was slid through the crack with a suspicious glare. I felt like a prisoner in what was supposed to be my home. Mom and Frank came back earlier than planned. No one hugged me, no one asked if I was okay. Amanda whispered that I had pushed her with all my strength, and her grandparents confirmed I'd shown dangerous behavior. Mom avoided my eyes and Frank shook his head. "I don't think I can let her be around Amanda anymore," he said. I was sent to live with Aunt Lena for 2 months. During that time, Mom arranged for me to see a therapist. They called it preventive, but I knew better. They thought something was wrong with me. I stayed silent, no tears, no protest. But inside I began to build walls. After that summer, I no longer felt like the house in Bellevue was my home. It was someone else's house, where I was just a temporary guest. And Mom, the one who once promised she'd always protect me, was now the first to let go when things got complicated. I left right after graduating high school, carrying an old suitcase and a full scholarship from the University of Minnesota. Mom didn't see me off at the bus station. Frank didn't bother to say goodbye. Only Natalie ran after me, shoved a bag of chocolate cookies into my hand and whispered, "Text me when you get there, okay?" Minneapolis greeted me with golden autumn leaves. I rented a tiny room near campus and worked part-time at the student cafe while attending classes. I knew I couldn't expect any support from Mom, so I didn't allow myself to fall behind. Every penny I spent came from sweat and tears. 4 years of college passed in all-nighters, late shifts, and quiet cries under the blanket whenever I missed Natalie, but I never once regretted it. I majored in business administration and quickly discovered I had a knack for market analysis and organizational strategy. Everything changed when I met Zoe, a classmate and the daughter of the owner of Pine Grove Kitchen restaurant chain. Zoe was nothing like the rich girls I had known. She was genuine, sharp, and openly admitted she was under a lot of pressure after her father handed her the reins of the business following his retirement. One day, after we wrapped up a presentation on supply chain optimization in the F&B industry, Zoe pulled me aside and asked, "Angela, would you be interested in interning at Pine Grove? We could really use someone with your organizational mind." I said yes immediately. No one knew that a single nod would mark the turning point of my life. At first, I was just an intern, handling documents and weekly reports. But after 3 months, I proposed a plan to revamp the menu based on seasonal consumer behavior. We cut over 20 unprofitable items and focused on flexible, customizable dishes. Sales increased by 18% in just 1 quarter. After graduation, Zoe offered me the position of her executive assistant. I moved to the headquarters in Chicago and became her right hand in every development project. Together, we transformed Pine Grove from a dated restaurant chain into a dynamic ecosystem: electric bike delivery services, weekly healthy meal plans, and co-working spaces inside the restaurants, where people could eat and work at the same time. Chain-wide revenue rose nearly 40% in 2 years. Media started mentioning me in articles about young female leaders reshaping the F&B industry. I still lived simply, rented a small apartment, drove the same old car from college, and cooked my own dinners every night. Then one day Mom called. I still remember that sound, the ringtone buzzing while I was reviewing the quarterly revenue report. I hesitated for a few seconds before picking up. "Angela?" Mom's voice was so quiet, I thought it was the wind. I don't think that's what it was. I waited. "Frank, he just got laid off. We've been trying everything for months, but we can't cover the mortgage anymore. They're about to foreclose the house." I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe an apology. But none came. Frank got on the phone next. His voice was low and tired. "Angela, I know I haven't been fair to you in the past, but right now we really need your help." I was silent for a long time. Then finally I said, "I'll send the money to cover the mortgage, but that doesn't mean I've forgiven you." From that month on, I transferred a fixed amount to Mom's mortgage account every month. I never called, never wrote, never visited. The only connection between me and them became cold lines on a bank statement. Frank later found a part-time job, but I kept sending money, not because I owed them anything, but because Natalie still lived there, and I couldn't let my sister struggle. I used to think that maybe, with time, my help would show Mom that I had never turned my back, that maybe one day, she'd call just to ask how I was doing. But the only call I got from her in 3 whole years was the one telling me I couldn't come home for Christmas. I was wrong. I thought money could buy back a bit of trust, a sliver of family. But to them, I would always be the name that needed to be forgotten, in exchange for someone else's will. And that day, I decided it was time to cut it off, not just financially, but for good. I sat in my apartment for a long time after hanging up. No more anger, just emptiness. Mom had told me straight up that I wasn't welcome home for Christmas, not because I did anything wrong, but simply because Amanda's grandparents didn't like me, and Mom didn't want to risk losing their inheritance. I used to think that after all the money I quietly sent, after all those months of covering the mortgage, Mom would at least be a little grateful. That if I couldn't be the daughter in her heart, I'd at least be someone she couldn't easily cast aside. I was wrong. The next day, I opened my banking app and canceled every single auto transfer to her mortgage account. A clean decision. No warning, no message. I had nothing left to give them. Not love, not money, not the faint hope that someday they might choose me over outsiders. That evening, Natalie showed up at my place earlier than expected. She brought with her a fake Christmas tree taller than 5 feet, a bag full of string lights, candy canes, and a bunch of pre-wrapped boxes. "This Christmas, we're making our own tradition," she declared, her eyes gleaming. We turned on the music, the apartment glowing with warm yellow lights, and decorated the tree with glass ornaments one by one. Natalie talked about school, her loud friends, and the presentation she'd just finished. I laughed more that night than I had all month, and when she handed me a small silver-wrapped box, I nearly cried. "It's not much," Natalie said softly, "but it's money I saved from my part-time job. I want you to buy something just for yourself, not for anyone else." I hugged her tight. The next day, I called a few close friends, the kind who were staying in the city for the holidays, not going home. Emily, my college classmate, brought boxes of homemade gingerbread cookies. Tyler and Sam, my longtime friends from undergrad, showed up with a stash of board games and a guitar. We turned that Christmas into a real celebration, warm, lively, and genuine. At midnight, we all gathered around the table, raised our glasses of eggnog, and sang, "Have yourself a merry little Christmas." I looked around, faces not tied to me by blood or shared pasts, but each one made me feel like I belonged. For the first time in years, I felt at home. I thought that was the end of it. I cut ties, they stayed silent, a quiet kind of closure. But then, 3 weeks later, Mom called again. I stared at her name flashing on the screen, my hand hesitating. In the end, I picked up. "Angela," she said quickly, getting straight to the point. "There's an issue with the bank payment. Did you forget to send it?" "No," I replied calmly. "I canceled it." "What?" Her voice cracked. "You can't do that. The payment's due today. We were counting on that money." "Then maybe call Amanda's grandparents," I said, voice steady but firm. "You chose them over me. Let them carry that responsibility too." "Angela, that was a moment of weakness. It was a desperate situation." "No," I cut her off. "It was a choice. And now, I get to make mine." After a few seconds of silence, Mom switched to a blaming tone. "You told Natalie not to come home, didn't you? We had to tell her grandparents she was sick. I had to make up a whole story, just because of you," I replied coldly. "So you're willing to lie about your daughter being seriously ill, as long as it means keeping the money from them? Don't judge me until you've been a mother," she yelled. I didn't respond. I simply pressed the button to end the call. From that moment, I never received another call. Natalie still visited me every week. We took walks, cooked together, laughed together. She told me Mom still mentioned me, but in a tone like I was a system error she couldn't erase. But I had made my choice. I was no longer the little girl waiting by the window for her mother. I was a woman who had learned to love herself, and who knew that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to close the door that once broke your heart and go find another way. Even if it starts with loneliness. On a late March afternoon, the sky over Seattle was thick with gray clouds, as if winter still refused to leave. I was buried in plans for the grand opening of Pine Grove's new location in the Fremont area when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it was Natalie, but when I looked through the peephole, my hand froze. Standing outside was Mom. Beside her were Frank and Natalie. I opened the door, partly out of curiosity, partly out of concern for my sister. Natalie stepped in first, her gaze gentle, but firm. "I know this is a surprise, but please, just hear them out." I stepped back and let them in. The familiar space suddenly felt stifling. Mom clutched her purse, her eyes scanning the room like she was searching for a memory that never existed. Frank stood still, hands clasped, his face pale with tension. "Angela," Mom began, her voice hoarse. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I'm asking for a chance to speak. I crossed my arms, standing across from them. Go ahead. She hesitated a moment, then continued. Christmas. I was wrong. I put money ahead of you. I betrayed the very child I was supposed to protect. I said nothing. It was still too early to trust regret, especially when it came after months of silence. Frank spoke for the first time, not avoiding my eyes. Angela, I know I treated you badly. I let my parents control everything. My views, my emotions. I stayed silent when I should have spoken up for you. That was my fault. Only realizing that now, I asked evenly, after all these years, after all the times you ignored me and turned your back like I never existed? Mom nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. Each month that the money didn't come, I wasn't upset about losing support. I was upset because I knew, for the first time, you had truly given up on me. I looked at Natalie. She stood in the center of the room waiting. You arranged this? I didn't force them, Natalie said. But I made it clear, if they wanted to hold on to anything left of this family, they had to come and face what they did. Silence settled over us. I looked at the three people, the woman who used to be my whole world, the man who never called me his daughter, and the only sister who never betrayed me. And let out a sigh. What about Amanda's grandparents? I asked. Do they still think I'm someone who needs to stay away to protect their precious will? Frank shook his head slightly. I called them. I told them I wouldn't keep pretending anymore. If that means they cut me out of the will, then so be it. I tilted my head. Sounds like a bold statement. Why now? Because of Natalie, he said. She told us if we didn't face the truth, she'd never come home again. I can't lose both my daughters. That made me pause. What did you just call me? Daughter, he replied, without hesitation. Mom stepped closer and pulled an envelope from her purse. We don't need you to send money anymore. Frank got a new job with a stable income. We're not here to ask for help. We're here to ask for you. I took the envelope. Inside were financial documents and an updated estate plan, where both Natalie and I were listed in Frank's will. For the first time in years, they were trying, really trying, not just with words. That doesn't mean I can trust you right away, I said. Wounds don't just disappear because of a few apologies. Mom nodded. I know. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove I won't repeat my mistakes. We're looking into a family therapist, Natalie added. I think we need someone to help untangle what's been buried too long. I looked into their eyes. No coldness, no pretense. None of the things I had become so used to. Just three people, carrying regret and a fragile hope for a second chance. I nodded slightly. I'm not promising forgiveness, but I can try to start again. Mom's face lit up, tears falling freely. Frank exhaled in relief, and Natalie stepped forward to hug me tightly. I stood in the middle of the room, still unsure if I'd done the right thing, but at least, for the first time in a long while, it felt like maybe I could start writing a new chapter on my own terms. Our first therapy session took place on a gloomy Thursday afternoon in the warmly lit office of Dr. Emma Wallace. She was a woman in her 50s with neatly tied gray hair and a voice both calm and sharp, enough to keep anyone from hiding their true feelings for long. I sat between Natalie and Mom with Frank across from us. No one spoke for the first few minutes. Only the ticking of the wall clock filled the awkward space. Let's begin with something simple, Dr. Wallace said. Each of you, tell me what you hope to get out of this process. Mom was the first to speak. I want my family back. I want Angela to be able to call me Mom without feeling like it's a stranger's word. I didn't react, but something shifted inside me. Frank was more hesitant. I want to understand how I let this happen and fix it if I still can. Natalie simply said, I want everyone to be honest. No more hiding things. When it was my turn, I looked down at my hands and said softly, I want to understand why I was treated like I didn't matter, and I need to know if that can ever change." The room fell silent, but this time, it was the kind of silence we needed. The sessions that followed weren't easy. Some days we talked things through. Other days I walked out with tears streaming down my face. Mom still had her reflexes, defensiveness, excuses. But Dr. Wallace didn't let it slide. "Are you explaining the pain?" she asked during one session, "or trying to justify it?" It stunned Mom into silence. Once, I recounted the time I was locked in the room after the incident with Amanda. Mom looked down in shame, and Frank bit his lip until it turned pale. "I know they were out of line," he said, eyes fixed on his hands. "But I didn't dare stand up for you. I've been controlled by my parents my whole life, and I thought if I stayed silent, everything would stay peaceful." "You thought I would be at peace being locked in a room, eating through a slot like some kind of criminal?" I asked, my voice cracking. Not out of anger, but from a disappointment that had built up for years. Frank looked up, his eyes red. "Angela, when I was your age, my parents threatened to cut off my tuition if I didn't study the major they chose. They threatened to disinherit me if I married someone they didn't approve of. They said they'd disown me if I let my wife's daughter sit at the same table. And I stayed silent through all of it. By the time I realized what I'd lost, you were already gone, too far to hear my apology." I didn't respond right away, but for the first time, I didn't see him as a distant shadow in my memory anymore. He was someone who had been controlled, just like me. We were more alike than I had ever allowed myself to believe. Outside of therapy, we started establishing small habits to rebuild. One dinner a month. Just the four of us, no one else. No talk of money, no mention of Amanda's grandparents, just everyday stories. Natalie's job at the city library, the lasagna Mom was relearning how to make, the new cafe Zoe and I had opened. There were still awkward silences and clumsy moments, but I began to notice real change. Mom stopped saying things like, "It was just a misunderstanding." She started saying, "I'm sorry," more easily, without the word "but" attached. One night after dinner, Frank handed me an envelope. I opened it and found a copy of a revised will. My name and Natalie's clearly listed, with no conditions. "This isn't to make you think we're trying to buy forgiveness," he said. "It's to show you that from now on, no one gets to use money to divide love in this family." I nodded, feeling a small weight lift off my chest. One time when it was just Mom and me in a therapy session, Dr. Wallace asked, "If there's one thing you've never said to Angela but wish you could, what is it?" Mom looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "Angela, I let you carry more than any child should have had to. I was wrong to stay silent. But what hurts me the most is knowing you had to learn to live without me. And I don't know how to earn my way back." I didn't cry, but inside me, a door, old and dusty, creaked open. We still weren't a perfect family, but at least this time, we were all walking in the same direction. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like the outsider in my own story. One afternoon in early June, with sunlight still lingering on the polished wood of my dining table, Frank invited me into his home office. The space was just as I remembered it. Thick books lined up on the shelves, a small bonsai tree near the window, and that dark brown leather chair that always smelled faintly of new paper. But this time, instead of feeling like an intruder or a guest, I stepped in with a different mindset. Part of me stayed cautious, but the rest was learning to welcome what was genuinely changing. Frank sat behind his desk, his hand resting lightly on a cream-colored envelope with my name handwritten on it. "Angela," he began, his voice deep and slow, "this is a copy of my new will. It was notarized by the lawyer this morning. I wanted you to receive it directly from me." I opened the envelope. Inside was the legal document, along with a clear asset breakdown. No fine print, no hidden strings. My name and Natalie's stood side by side, with specific notes about our shares, regardless of anything from Amanda's side of the family. I told them, "I no longer follow their conditions," Frank said, eyes still on me. They were angry, threatened to cut ties, but I told them I've been cut off from myself for far too long. It's time to fix that. I looked at him and said nothing, but inside something shifted. Not because of what was in the will. I never needed any of it. But because, for the first time, I felt seen as a real part of this family. After that, family dinners became a new tradition, not forced or awkward like before, but genuine get-togethers. We took turns hosting, sometimes at my place, sometimes at Natalie's, and sometimes in Mom's old kitchen, the one that had seen both my childhood and the times I used to avoid the gaze of Amanda's grandparents. But now, they never showed up. Mom had cut ties with them on her own. She changed her phone number and told them clearly, if they wanted to be part of their grandchildren's lives, they had to respect everyone, or no one at all. We started talking about things no one had dared mention before. The time I was locked up after Amanda's fall, how Mom used to avoid the truth, and how Natalie often felt stuck in between. There were tears, there were heavy silences, but not once did anyone deny or deflect anymore. I remember one evening, after Natalie finished talking about her work at the library, Frank suddenly said, "When my daughter got into college, I didn't say anything. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I didn't know how to show it, having never learned how to love without conditions." Mom, sitting beside him, gently took his hand. "Then let's learn. Together." I left the table that night with an unfamiliar feeling. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because, for once, I wasn't carrying the weight of our family alone, unseen and unheard. A week later, Natalie sent me a small card. It read, "Real Family Day, first celebration this Saturday. No pressure, no obligation. Come if you want, just bring your honest heart." I laughed when I read it. The card had a doodle on it, 4 people holding hands in front of a giant pizza. Natalie had never been good at drawing, but I still framed it and hung it on my fridge. That night, I sat alone on the balcony, watching the city light up. A year ago, I'd sat in this very spot, wiping away tears after a Christmas call that made me finally see my true place in the family. Now, I was still here, but with a different heart. This hadn't come from easy forgiveness. It came from me standing up, saying enough, and walking away to protect myself. I'd learned a powerful truth. Not everyone born under the same roof will choose to love you the right way, but if you protect your boundaries with courage, sometimes you're the one who teaches them how to love, from the beginning. And in the moment I stopped fearing losing them, was the moment they began to truly value me. The new Pine Grove branch in Fremont officially opened on a sunny Sunday afternoon, with a light breeze carrying the scent of early cherry blossoms. I stood at the front desk, adjusting my name badge, nerves fluttering, even though I was used to this by now. But something was different today. Not just because this was the 10th location Zoe and I had built together, but because for the first time, I had invited my whole family to the opening. When I turned around, I saw them walk in, Mom, Frank, and Natalie. No one wore anything flashy. No exaggerated compliments or false smiles, just genuinely warm eyes and a real hug from Natalie as she whispered, "I'm proud of you." We had dinner upstairs at the restaurant, under soft golden lights and gentle jazz playing in the background. Mom talked about her new garden, Frank shared his home renovation project, and Natalie chattered on about her recent trip to Portland with friends from the library. It wasn't perfect. Mom still occasionally slipped up and said something that made me pause mid-bite. Natalie shot her subtle glances, silent warnings. But this time, no one stormed off. No one shut down. After each misstep, there was a timely apology. After each misunderstanding, a real effort to listen. We had changed, not because of some miracle, but because of deliberate choices. Every day. Once, after a therapy session, Mom pulled me aside and handed me a soft leather journal. "I've written everything I remember in here, the things I did wrong, the things I wish I could redo, not to justify, but so you know, I'm starting over." I didn't open it right away. But I carried it with me as a reminder that some relationships don't die. They just need to be cleared out, rebuilt, and reseated. 3 months later, Natalie moved into her own apartment near downtown. I helped her pack, and then the two of us lay sprawled on the empty floor, staring up at the ceiling like kids discovering the world for the first time. "Do you think our family will stay like this?" she asked, her voice suddenly low. I turned to look at her, shook my head slightly, then smiled. "I don't know, but I believe if they keep choosing love, then yes." "Family is a choice?" Natalie tilted her head. "Yeah, it's not a given. It's something you choose every day. Choosing to stay, to forgive, to listen." Natalie stayed quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Then I'll choose too, every day." That night, I went home alone. The breeze from Lake Washington swept through the window, carrying the chill of a summer not yet fully bloomed. I turned on the lights, walked into the kitchen, placed my bag on the counter, and paused in front of a small framed photo on the wall. In the picture, Natalie and I were grinning wide during the Fremont grand opening. Next to us stood Mom and Frank. Not perfect, but clearly trying. I'd labeled the photo simply, "Family, Revised Edition." I thought back to everything. The locked room when I was 14, the nights I lay awake hearing Mom cry softly outside my door, the silent phone on Christmas. And then I remembered Mom's trembling voice in therapy, Frank's shaky words when he first called me daughter, and the look in Natalie's eyes whenever I was on the verge of falling apart. A look that never let go. No, I haven't forgotten the past, but I refuse to let it change my future. I understand not everyone gets a chance to rebuild with their family, and not everyone should. But if one day the people who hurt you learn to stop, to say sorry without demanding immediate forgiveness, to listen instead of defend, then maybe they deserve a chance. And you deserve peace, even if it comes late. Family, in the end, isn't just where you're born. It's where you're chosen to stay. A place where people, even after being lost, come back together. Not because of blood, but because they choose to love you the way you deserve to be loved. And on that journey, I'm no longer the girl who was cast aside on Christmas night. I am Angela, a woman who has learned to stand tall, to love herself, and to bravely say, "I deserve to be loved, unconditionally." From my own story, I've learned that family isn't fixed. It's a choice, rebuilt each day with honesty and respect. Sometimes, to find your worth, you have to let go, stand up, and say enough. But if you're lucky, the ones who once hurt you might learn to change. I no longer wait for a perfect family. I only hope for people brave enough to make things right. And I've found them, right in my own family. What do you think about Angela's journey and the transformation of her family? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more heartfelt, honest stories about family and life in our upcoming episodes.